Leaders of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, have ordered the activation and deployment of a standby military force to Niger to restore constitutional order there. They also warned countries within the bloc supporting the coup leaders to stay off such actions. The decisions were reached at the second extraordinary summit in Abuja on the political crisis in Niger. However, State House correspondent Adesuwa Moran reports that the leaders re-emphasized their preferred choice of diplomacy.
Since the July 26 coup that overthrew the democratically elected government in Niger, the coup leaders have refused to relinquish power and release ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. Leaders from the West African bloc convened for the second time within 10 days to address the ongoing crisis. Acknowledging the failure of initial sanctions and mediation attempts to engage the military junta, the summit begins with a commitment to prioritize diplomacy while maintaining all available options.
More so, in reaffirming our relentless commitment to democracy, human rights, and the well-being of the people of Niger, it is crucial that we prioritize diplomatic negotiations and dialogue as the bedrock of our approach. And we still look to engage the party involved, including the coup leaders, in honest discussion to convince them to relinquish power as suggested and reinstate President Bazoum.
Following hours of closed-door discussions, which included reviewing envoy reports, ECOWAS Chiefs of Defense Staff meeting, and recent developments in Niger, the leaders come to a unanimous agreement.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Underscore its continued commitment to the restoration of constitutional order through peaceful means.
They condemned the continued detention of the ousted president and announced their intent to enforce measures in place, including strict travel bans.
Enforce all measures, in particular border closures and strict travel bans and assets freeze, on all persons or groups of individuals whose actions hinder all peaceful efforts aimed at ensuring the smooth and complete restoration of constitutional order. Direct the President of the Commission to monitor the implementation of the sanctions.
President of Côte d'Ivoire, who left the summit before its conclusion, expresses his view on the coup, stating that ECOWAS must not tolerate the coup plotters.
They're keeping President Bazoum as a hostage. I personally consider this as a terrorist act, and we cannot let this continue. We have to act. The position of Côte d'Ivoire, which has been endorsed by all of the head of states, are that we have been able to tell these putschists that their place is in the barracks. They should go to fight the terrorists and not try to kidnap a democratically elected president.
The ECOWAS authorities issued a stern warning to member states obstructing peaceful crisis resolution in Niger, outlining potential consequences. They are also calling for global support, including from the United Nations, to ensure a quick restoration of constitutional order in the country. The second extraordinary summit has come to a close. The regional leaders left no doubt about their resolve to restore stability and pave the path to lasting peace. However, achieving this through diplomacy remains uncertain at this time, with the activation of a military standby force to restore order in Niger. From the presidential villa Abuja, Adesuwa Moran, Arise News.
Meanwhile, in Niger, coup leaders have announced a list of 21 people they say will become ministers in the new transition government. The announcement came just hours before the emergency ECOWAS meeting. The cabinet will be headed by Prime Minister Ali Mehman Lamine Zain, a civilian. 3 of the generals who helped in the coup were named Ministers of Defense, Interior and Sports. Well, fine. ECOWAS summit yesterday, heads of state and government communique is out.
Yeah, so the communique is out. pretty much, yes, part of diplomacy, part of peace, but also we are keeping a standing troop aside. And that has also sent a very strong signal to the Nigerian coupists, because there was a message that came out yesterday that they were threatening also to kill Mr. Bazoum in the case where they invade the country. For me, I see that as one, yes, a threat, but two, it's an indication that the coupists are also feeling the pressure. For them to be able to put out a rash measure like that in strategy, that means they are feeling the pressure. What we can also do, since we've opened the channel of conversation and communication through that cultural means, which can also be said sort of like, interpersonal relationship, be it soft power, be it anything, let us improve on that to be able to talk to these people. Because when you look at it, based on what is on ground, I don't see these coup plotters having that acceptance of the people for a long time. The bellwether for any country is the economy. The Nigerian economy obviously is starting to falter. And if that happens, then definitely the people will start to ask questions from their governments. So the people's support will definitely whittle out at some point. Then the question is, can diplomacy come in? The troops on standby, not necessarily putting those troops in, but it shows that they are feeling the heat. So the question is, what can we quickly do? I think it's also good to be able to explore that channel even further, Emir Sanusi's channel. So how quick can we also get a government, Nigerian government, probably now then an ECOWAS rep team, emissary, to also meet with those people? What will be the cards on the table? The scenario on the table is these leaders are already digging in, they're consolidating. Best case scenario now is a transition. I think the possibility of Bazoum coming back is very slim. The odds, very low. Let's not deceive ourselves. Can we talk to these people about a 1-2 year transition down the line, then call back for democracy? And they will make their demands. Probably one of their demands will be they don't want Bazoum to run in the elections, or they want him to run in elections. Also, explore other paths, because there are other political angles to all of this. One, the CRR rebel group that has a very strong foothold in the north. Also, you need to involve them in a conversation like this. Because with this threat that they might kill Bazoum, that might intensify efforts. Only God knows who is using them. Intensify efforts, talk to all of them. Also, the past leaders. It's so full, like the ambassador mentioned yesterday, and some other people that have strategic interest there. Make the conversation spread across board. And then keep the sanctions in place. Once that sanction kicks in and they lose the respect of the people and they lose the support of the people, then it becomes an easier conversation. And then be realistic about it. I don't think Bazoum will be coming back anytime soon. So let's look at it that way, and let's say a panzer. But let military option be out of the cards. Yeah, we can keep a troop at standby, which I think is also a negotiation strategy. Which I think is to bring in that air of, if you do otherwise, we might invade. But I don't think we'll be using that. Let's keep that aside as a negotiation strategy, and let's keep the heat on those guys. And they'll balk. Just some strategy putting out there.
Well, a number of things. The statement by the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government is contradictory. On one hand, the ECOWAS heads of state are saying that they are deploying a standby force immediately, and that the defense chiefs have been so directed. The defense chiefs haven't met previously in Abuja. So, and then on the other hand, they say, oh, all other options are still on the table, including dialogue and mediation. So what exactly are they saying? Are you deploying the troops immediately? And what is called ECOWAS standby force? Yes, ECOWAS previously had intervened in some other countries, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone. As recently as 2022, they had a stabilization force of about 700 troops from Nigeria that intervened in Guinea-Bissau. So, except what they are saying is that this states that were at the meeting will contribute troops, as indicated by the Ivorian President Ouattara. Now, that's number one. The second part of it is, from the way they manage it, President Ouattara made a point that this is not unilateral action from President Tinubu. He provided a good cover for President Tinubu to say it's a collective decision. President Ouattara spoke. President Macky Sall of Senegal also spoke. And then the communique was presented by Dr. Omar Touré, who is the president of the ECOWAS Commission. So it's not President Tinubu taking the lead, and making it look like it's a Nigerian initiative. So that much also came through. The third point is that the ECOWAS leaders insisted that they had to take this action because of the failure of the resolutions that they took at their first meeting. Now they are having a second extraordinary summit on the same subject of Niger within 10 days, and that they have no option but to act, as we had President Ouattara saying. Okay, they want to act. It's group action, collective action, as President Tinubu pointed out. But I find that President Tinubu is in a very delicate situation. You know that he had approached the Senate of the Federal Republic to ask for, the imprimatur of the people's representatives to follow up on the resolutions of ECOWAS. And the Senate said, no, only, take part in peace and mediation options. Do not contribute Nigerian troops. And they committed their resolution into writing. So the president acted under Section 5, Sub 4 of the 1999 Constitution, and the Senate of the Federal Republic responded. Is President Buhari going to commit Nigerian troops? Is he going to defy the Senate of the Federal Republic? Is he going to go back to the Senate of the Federal Republic or the National Assembly? Or is he going to act under Section 5, Subsection 5? Even if he does, and he sends Nigerian troops, now that the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Abubakar, is saying that the Nigerian Air Force is on standby. The Nigerian Air Force is ready. We have 75 more aircraft in the fleet. Okay. Are they going to deploy those fleet of the Nigerian Air Force without the approval of the National Assembly? Section 5 sub 5 is very clear. If you commit, then you must go back to the same National Assembly within a week, and you will get a reply within 14 days. Now, if he doesn't do that, that will be an impeachable offense. That will amount to gross misconduct on the part of the President of Nigeria. The other question to ask is, has the President of Nigeria consulted with the Council of State in a situation like this? If Nigeria is going on a military action, then you have to consult also the Council of State or the National Defense Council. Who else has been consulted? Apparently, the pressure from Nigerian people, the JNI, Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, the Ulamas, the Izala, the Christian Association of Nigeria, the latest is Afenifere, and other concerned citizens. All of that intervention, including that of Emir Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, who seem to have had no effect whatsoever in the consideration of the ECOWAS leaders in their deliberation at their second extraordinary summit. Which is why you now see you ask the question, is President Tinubu, is he under any kind of pressure to act, without reference to the feelings of the Nigerian people? But as often turns out in these matters, it's not so straightforward. Victoria Nuland, the Undersecretary of State of the United States, is the person quoted by Associated Press as having said they have intelligence that, the coupists are saying if there is any move against them, they will eliminate President Bazoum. And which is why maybe President Ouattara is saying, even keeping the man in isolation amounts to a terrorist act, in quotes. But the UN Secretary General has also expressed concern to say that, look, this man is in isolation and is being fed with rice, although some people may consider rice a special delicacy. But what is also instructive about the meeting yesterday was that the president of Mauritania was there, the president of Burundi was there, the AU, the United Nations sent representatives. So there is an expanding scope of action. And ECOWAS is specifically calling on the African Union and also the United Nations to back its action. So when the war begins, as it may well turn out to be, and it may not really be easy, the implications are clear to see. We have articulated the likely consequences: refugee crisis, humanitarian crisis, and nobody knows how those coup leaders could respond. And that is why those 7 states of Nigeria in the north, bordering Niger, have been expressing concern. What I find instructive is that yesterday, in Katsina State, there was a prayer session in Katsina, led by the governor, asking for divine intervention so that Katsina is not put in harm's way because of the proposed ECOWAS intervention. Well, maybe other states of Nigeria should also start praying now that President Tinubu says, Nigeria cannot pull out of ECOWAS resolution. When Nigerians don't know what to do, they just blame God. They hand everything over to God. Whereas all of these problems that we deal with in Africa are man-made problems. It's not God that is causing the problem. It's because our leaders don't do the right thing. And, they really don't lead us aright.
Well, I think beyond Katsina, there are other states and people who have already begun to pray. If you hear the word on the street, a number of people are quite anxious, and that's why there's quite an interest in what's going on in Niger and ECOWAS's response to Niger, particularly as our President Bola Tinubu, is chair of ECOWAS currently. Not just the northern states that border Niger are concerned, because we have talked about the ripple effect even across Nigeria. And the big question had been, can Nigeria afford to lead a war if ECOWAS decides to apply military force in Niger? So a number of things are at stake, and that's where the challenge or the issues are. Yesterday, the second extraordinary summit by heads of government in the ECOWAS bloc met. As has been mentioned, a number of countries were present with some observers or those in attendance. But very instructive was that there was no representation from Mali, or the president of Mali and Burkina Faso were not there. They were not present. And they had already established where they stand in the Niger conflict, that if there's military force intervention in Niger, they would count it as action against them as well, aggression against them as well. Now, talking about a number of things being at stake and why ECOWAS will still come out saying that all options are still on the table, including the use of military force if the Niger coupists do not transition back to democratic government, and as part of their request is that the President Bazoum, is restored as president. As Rufai mentioned, I quite align with that. The coupists seem to be moving along. They've appointed a prime minister who is civilian, that's worthy of note, and also a government, an interim cabinet to run the affairs of the nation. Now, one of the reasons why ECOWAS might be loath to back down on their announcement of intervention, of military intervention, is that it would make them look weak. And that's something they don't or they cannot afford to do at this point. And that's why a big question was, the deadline expired on the 6th of August. What will the ECOWAS bloc do? What will be the decision? A number of analysts had already said that it's very unlikely that they would go back on their word, on their decision to apply military intervention. And we saw that play out yesterday. Even though they didn't say when or give the timeline that when diplomacy will elapse, or dialogue will elapse, they've said that all on the table, and their chiefs of defense had met and they had marshaled out a plan. The question that must be answered is, how long are they giving the Niger coupists before they then apply military force? They didn't say. They just say they will continue speaking, and then, as a last resort, they will apply a military force. That's one. The second thing is that one of the reasons why they cannot allow the Niger coupists to hold the upper hand and must show themselves to be strong as a united front and against the coup is that it's a threat to democracy in the West African bloc. We've talked about the spate of coups in West Africa in the last 3 years. Niger is one too many, and it sends a strong signal to other countries, perhaps in this particular region, who might be thinking or might be plotting in terms of their military to overthrow a government because of dissatisfaction. If this Niger coup is not properly handled, it sends a strong signal to not just Nigerian and Mali and Burkinabes, but to Nigeria and other West African countries who might be perhaps thinking of going along this route. So the ECOWAS bloc has a tough decision ahead of them, or a tough stance ahead of them. But one thing is clear. They are not backing down. And another thing is clear, the Nigerians the Niger coupists don't seem to want to dialogue. In fact, a source has said that they had asked that the sanctions be taken off. That is where they've frozen accounts, they've blocked borders, the airspace, because they are not able to get medicine, medical supplies, and food supplies. So it is biting hard. But so far, they don't seem to be capitulating, and that's the big question here. It's now ECOWAS versus Niger. ECOWAS does not want to look weak. The heads of government do not want to look like they give an order and they are backing down. And then they also need to send a strong message to other countries that this will not be accepted and democracy must be protected at all costs. The final question to be asked is, who is going to fund this military intervention and what percentage of support will other countries contribute? We've talked about the Nigerian factor and how much, and the fact that Nigeria is a superpower on this bloc and would perhaps contribute by 80% in terms of military might and resources. What will the other countries contribute? Has this conversation been had? These are the concerns for Nigerians, the effect on our nation if we do ultimately go to war with Niger, or ECOWAS goes to war with Niger.